Hey, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour, and I like going around to other people's churches and pointing at things and asking them what it means and why they believe what they believe and what they think about what other people believe. And basically, just having fun talking shop about a topic that usually causes us to melt down and get angry at each other with people who don't really melt down and get angry at anybody, so we can just learn and enjoy each other's company and make some friends. And part of the fun of this is that I get to bottle it up, put it on the internet, and share it with you. And further part of the fun of this is when you give me feedback and you're like, hey, you should go and do a video with this church next. And one that you guys have been throwing out a lot is the Seventh Day Adventist church. And there are two reasons this seems like a great place to go next. One, because until very recently, I knew absolutely nothing about this expression of Christianity other than that there was a girl in high school who was Seventh Day Adventist, and she and her family just kind of vanished from Friday night till Sunday morning. And otherwise, she was normal. And that is all we ever really knew. And we were all afraid to ask her why or what that meant. But the other reason that I think this will be a really good video to go and make is because actually one of my favorite friends from around the internet, a guy named Justin Koo, is a Seventh Day Adventist. And we talk on the phone all the time and compare notes on videos and stuff. He had a channel called That Christian Vlogger. And now he does a thing called I'm Listening. He actually does stuff on behalf of the Seventh Day Adventist Church. So I'm going to bring him in right now. Justin. Everyone, Justin.
Hey, how's it going?
Justin is my best Seventh-day Adventist friend. And remember a minute ago, I was saying I didn't know anything about Adventism until a couple years back. Well, that's because I had like a 2-hour conversation with Justin.
I think that was our first conversation. It was like 2.5 hours.
Yeah, it was kind of a lot, but you kept responding so well to all my questions that I just sort of felt like it'd be okay for me to keep going at it. And that is exactly why I thought we should do the Seventh-day Adventist Church video at your church in Happy Valley, Oregon with your pastor. And so you've been kind enough to line all of that up. But before we go and hit that up, I wondered if you could just give us the really quick rundown on what Adventism is so we kind of have a sense of what we're walking into.
Yeah, for sure. Seventh-day Adventism is part of the Protestant branch of Christianity. We're perhaps most well known for our emphasis on Saturday instead of Sunday, and healthy living, vegetarian lifestyle. We've got a bunch of hospitals and schools all around the world. And one of my favorite facts about us is that we are the nation's most diverse denomination.
Cool. So in terms of your name, the Seventh Day thing is pretty obvious. And you go to church on Saturdays, you have a little different view of the Sabbath than a lot of other Christians historically. But what does the Adventist part mean?
So yeah, Adventist, same thing like the season of Advent, the coming of, heavy emphasis on the soon return of Jesus Christ.
All right. Yeah. Oh, thanks for the baseline, buddy. Okay, everybody else. Let's go hang out with Justin in Oregon, meet the other people who are going to show us around, and get after learning about Seventh-day Adventism. When I got to Oregon, I figured out pretty quickly that Justin had pulled out all the stops on this thing. There's sound and camera people there, more than I'm used to working with, and they were great to talk to. I met not only Justin, but also Dan from the Seventh-day Adventist home office, and this gentleman with the beard, his name is Greg, that's Justin's pastor, so he's going to take the lead on the tour here.
Right, solid.
Okay, so I've never been inside this building. I've never been inside an Adventist church ever. Can we just go in and poke around and stuff?
Yeah, let's get
Sure. Let's do it. Lead the way.
do it.
All right. Do I see that you have a Bible under glass? So what version of Bible would you guys put under glass?
I actually don't know the version of that Bible.
What?
You know what? The Bible is important, but the version of the Bible is we can just say it right off. Like, I think the best version of the Bible is as many as possible.
So you guys do not have a special or unique or preferred Seventh-day Adventist translation that everybody uses?
Nope.
What's most common?
Our Pew Bible is ESV. I often preach out of the New Living Translation. I think one of the things that you would find if you talk to Adventists is that there's a whole wide range of embracing, a language and that feels good to an individual rather than the denomination or churches saying like this is the way, walk in it.
So people mill around in here? Like, does this place stay pretty crowded after church?
Yeah.
Or people get out of here as fast as they can?
No, this is hard to shoulder your way through sometimes.
Okay.
We have 2 services here, and so the space between those, we have like a study hour, Sabbath school we call it, and that time is like, there's lots of people hanging out in here. And
so you said Sabbath school is what you guys call it? Because you wouldn't say Sunday school.
Well, we wouldn't say Sunday school because it isn't on Sunday. So
you go to this, Justin?
I do. This is actually my home church.
So what's the difference between the two things? I mean, why do you have church and Sabbath school?
One's more community and conversation based. The other is kind of more sitting in.
It's corporate worship versus like a community-based study time.
One of the things in North America is there is a department that like creates a Sabbath school quarterly or lesson, and so I think the intention behind that was to have all Adventist churches commonly united under one set of like curriculum. But what I've seen in my experience traveling around Adventist churches is that some churches choose to participate with that, and other churches say, no, we want to do something that makes sense with this local context.
So you guys have that flexibility then. It's not it's not like top-down hierarchy, here's what we're teaching this year.
No.
So that feels more evangelical to me than...
It's very organic.
When you walked in, you said, hey, this kind of feels familiar.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons it feels familiar is because we don't, like, Adventist churches don't have like a specific architectural style. Like, you could walk into 10 different Adventist churches and see 10 different things in terms of how, like, the artwork that's on the walls or those kinds of things, as opposed to some religious traditions that you walk in, you know that you're in, you know, a church that's Greek Orthodox or Anglican or whatever.
Sure.
So, that's, I think, one of the uniquenesses about Adventism, if you could call it unique, that we're not unique in that sense, maybe.
And Dan, you do like national communication stuff, right? So you've been to
a lot of churches.
How many of those 6,200 churches have you been to?
400 or 500, and I've been to every territory of the world too as well. I used to work for the global office.
400 or 500.
Yeah,
I mean, got a ways to go.
Yeah.
So what are your absolute fanciest churches like, and where are they?
We have very large churches in Southern California. We've got Loma Linda University as our healthcare institution there. The church I attend on the East Coast in Maryland is, you could call it more high church. We've got a nice organ, and we have about 2,000 members, and it's more of a traditional service. But you go right down the road, and you'll have a rock and roll church. So, and I know people that kind of go to both.
So this is where all the Sunday morning stuff happens.
Well, there is some Sunday morning stuff that happens here, because there's a congregation that rents our church on Sundays.
Oh, I said Sunday morning again. It's so dang different. Do I need to lose a hat in here?
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay.
You can leave it.
I mean,
whatever
they're
you're
stained
comfortable
glass.
with. Whatever you're comfortable
I'm
with.
right in between.
Like since you said that, I'll just say, Adventist churches oftentimes partner up with other denominations because our buildings are largely not used on Sundays.
We've got smaller companies or churches that are getting started where they don't have a building, and so they'll rent from a Sunday church.
I bet this gets pretty crowded on Sundays. I mean, I like the layout. I noticed the way like the whole thing is very wide.
We're just going to keep laughing when you say things like that. It does get crowded on Sundays. It's really crowded on Saturday morning.
I'm telling you. Who goes to church on Saturdays, guys?
Yeah, just us.
Only about 21 million people every Saturday.
Is it okay if I walk up here a little bit?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. Go anywhere you want.
This is okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So one of the things that strikes me is that a lot of the high churches that I've been to, it seems like they're very, very long,
right,
and this is very wide. Does that mean something? Is it intentional, or is it just how the building worked out?
This sanctuary is a preacher's dream, in my opinion, because the furthest seat in the house is, I can still see what people are feeling and experiencing, and I feel connected to them when I'm speaking.
Justin, you guys do music and stuff in here? I mean, I see the piano. What else do you do music-wise?
I think one of the maybe trends with Adventism is that it leans a little bit more on the conservative side of things, and so like things like a drum set are generally more absent than they are more present. But yeah, piano, whatever. I think every church has its own culture, its own sound.
So we've actually, I just pulled this out. This is the back of the pew, and you can probably go to almost any Adventist church and find this sitting in the back of the pew. There's readings in the back, scripture readings, but you also have a whole bunch of traditional hymns that most Christians would recognize.
Can I rifle through it?
Yeah, sure, of course.
Let me see. I'm giving you the camera, buddy. I want to see how many of these I actually know. And I'm not like I'm a hymn expert.
Right.
Okay, I Surrender All. I got that one.
Yep.
So you guys, this is your altar call song?
We-
I mean, you just sing I Surrender All
Whatever the
again and
minister of
again and
music
again
defines
until
it.
everybody converts.
No.
Because that's what we do. I surrender all and just as I am, man.
Yeah.
Are there any hymns in here that are like specifically hardcore Adventist hymns that advance uniquely Adventist doctrine?
There's a song that was written, it's from probably the 80s, I would guess,
We Have This Hope.
called We Have This Hope. And it's a song about the second coming of Jesus, that's the hope that burns in our hearts.
Which goes back to our name, Adventist,
Sure.
believing the second coming.
And so I crack that open. I'm like, wow, this is completely familiar, and that doesn't really surprise me. But that I think it's an interesting indicator of kind of where we're at in terms of what we're doing theologically. That you sing our songs and we sing your songs, and they're really kind of
our songs.
When I said that we want our kids to know the great hymns of the faith, one of the reasons why that is because there's theology there. It also speaks to the shared theological roots that we have in, many of the Adventist founders came out of Methodism.
How does the service break down just in terms of the amount of time that you guys are in here? How much is singing? How much is talking?
Yeah, but I would say generally speaking, there's a handful of songs, a blend of hymns and contemporary songs, and then a prayer or two, announcement. I mean, it's fairly vanilla, so it's fairly standard. It's what you would expect at any other church out there. I wouldn't say there's anything in our service that's out of the ordinary.
What's the point of church? Like, what are you going for with the worship service? What do you hope happens? What do you believe happens there?
Our center that we are aiming at every week, speaking as pastors here, is that we lift up the gospel of Jesus Christ every single week, no matter what we're talking about, that it's rooted and based in the gospel of Jesus, the cross of Christ, and the proclaiming the resurrection.
What are the one or two quirky, unique things that I should know on the front end? Like stand up, sit down, gesture I need to make. Do you have anything like that?
Yeah, if you're saying for potluck, it's likely, like 95% of the chance is going to be a vegetarian potluck.
But it's not a requirement of the faith.
That's one of the myths about Adventism, that people think, would I have to become a vegetarian? No. Like, actually, I don't know the most recent statistics you could probably say, but I think probably it's like 30% of Adventists are vegetarians. So it's not a requirement.
But anything in terms of like ritually that you guys do that's different in a service than your run-of-the-mill evangelical?
It's foot washing. So basically, based out of Jesus's washing the feet of the disciples and saying, before the Last Supper, he washed their feet and basically said, hey, because I've washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. It's just a reminder that we come to the table with a heart that's oriented towards serving one another and loving one another.
Yeah. My wife and I actually did a foot washing at our wedding. As kind of like our symbol of unity. Yeah. People sometimes do like the rope or the sand. We decided to do a foot washing as our expression of our desire to serve each other.
No. Like, what if you're here as a guest and you're like, yeah, I'm down with it?
No, man.
You're most likely going to get a church member asking if they could wash their feet.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
One of the amazing things about Jesus is that he dipped his hand in the dish, with Judas, even though he knew, because he said, one of you is going to betray me. But right before that, he had also got down on a knee and did the humble work of a servant, and it wasn't in a time where people took a shower before they came to church and put on clean socks. It was like, it really was the work of a slave that Jesus did when he washed Judas's feet. And it speaks to the very baseline of like when we come to the Lord's table, that we come there with humility. And it's the perfect place to be. Like when we're kneeling at the foot of a cross, we're in the perfect place to be able to wash our brother's feet, because the ground's level at the foot of the cross. There's no I'm better than you and so you should serve me or what. I mean, we're here to serve each other.
Mm-hmm. So, we also have open communion where you don't have to be a member to take part in communion service. If you're visiting and you want to take part, you're welcome to take part.
What if somebody who wasn't a Christian accidentally gets communion?
I've never had that. I've never seen that that's a problem. If they feel that moved, that they want to take part in the communion service, I don't think there's anything that says you have to be baptized to be able to do that.
The vast majority of Adventist churches have communion quarterly, so 4 times a year. It's not something that we do every week.
Okay, that's
a big difference.
That's the most spread out interval I think I've ever heard of.
Yeah. This church doesn't. There's no one that says we can't do it more often than that. This church doesn't do it every week, but we do communion much more often than that.
So did the bread and the cup become the body and blood of Christ when you guys pray over it?
We don't believe in transubstantiation. The bread and the cup are we do this in remembrance of the sacrifice of Jesus.
Usually if that's the theology of a group, that tends to come with kind of that lower church assumption that salvation is a little bit more between you and God, and that the church plays a reduced role as mediator. Yes. Is that a fair?
Yep, very fair.
Okay.
I grew up in a pastor's family, and the bread and the cup are treated with respect. So like after communion, we don't just like go throw stuff down the drain or put it in the garbage. It gets poured out on the ground, and my dad would always take communion bread home and burn it. Yeah. But it wasn't from the same. It was from the sense of like that there's something sacred. But it wasn't like the sense of like this is the body of the literal body of Jesus.
But once you bring the bag of communion bread or wafers in, that is the moment at which it becomes significant. The moment at which that bread is made and designated for this purpose is the moment it achieves.
Yeah, and I think that is, it's interesting because there's no significant like theological teaching around that. Like if you read
Okay.
our church manual would say, handle these things with respect, but it's not. It's different. There's a respect there, and there's a reverence in the sense of, not in the sense of worship, but just in like, this is sacred. It's not common.
And I'm going to flip around here. What else in this room conveys theological meaning?
We have a baptistry.
Can I check it out?
Yeah, absolutely. Here.
Curious.
Yeah.
Behind the veil of the church.
This looks pretty permanent, but
Well, we built it last week. It'll be gone by midnight on Saturday night.
So you have a baptistry in here somewhere?
Yep, it's right here. There's lights in here right now, I'll just tell you, so it looks a
whatever.
little different than normal, but yeah. And normally, a lot of times, this is wide open on,
This is
on
huge.
Sabbath morning.
I mean, what, you just line up like 10 people in here at once? There's a lot of room.
Well, sometimes we have two or three at once. If you get more than that in there, it gets a little crowded, but
Okay.
as many as the Lord sends us. Baptism in the Adventist context it's a believer's baptism. We don't have kind of spontaneous baptisms in our context
Why don't you do spontaneous baptisms?
because of Jesus's command to go and make disciples of all nations, teaching them and baptizing them. And so there's a teaching component that we engage with.
Thank you for letting me sneak back here. Do we need to shut this?
We can.
I want to participate.
It keeps the heat.
Those are hefty.
This stained glass is the depiction of the story of the Good Samaritan.
Ah, okay. Okay.
So you see the Good Samaritan cradling the subject of the story.
Oh, and
then
two passers-by.
The two people behind, yeah.
Why the Good Samaritan? I mean, you have one bit of distinctly biblical art in here, and you went with this. What does this communicate that would make this be what you'd pick?
Well, it communicates true religion being embodied in loving and serving. And obviously it's an important story, one that was told by Jesus, but it was one that where there was a failure of the religious system to actually love and care for people. And so it keeps it before us that the model that we see in Jesus is that love for our neighbor and service. All of that happening in the shadow of the cross, like the cross is what motivates us the cross is where we most clearly see the love of God depicted, and then that motivates us through understanding that to love the world around us.
Is it okay if at this point we pull up some chairs and I've got a whole bunch of questions now rattling around in my head?
That'd be great.
Can I badger all three of you guys?
You bet. Let's do it.
Relentlessly?
Yeah.
Thanks to everybody for making this thing go and for trusting me to come and check out your church. That is awesome. Also, full disclosure for everybody, I don't think I've ever done a video before where I've got 3 hyper capable people and we're all touring and talking at once. It was hard to know, like, who do I direct this question to? So I kind of let Greg in the edit do most of the heavy lifting, but I really appreciate everybody's contribution on that. And please forgive my ham-fistedness. There were a couple of questions that I still had lingering that I didn't get to ask as we were there. And so I've still got Justin here, and I want to run these by you real quick, buddy. So on the question of baptism, do Adventists believe that a person becomes a Christian at the moment of baptism? Or do you guys believe that baptism is an outward expression of a spiritual thing that has already happened in the life of the Christian?
I think that conversion happens a little bit prior to baptism. I think conversion for us is generally something that happens in your heart between you and God. And then baptism is something that happens later on to confirm that's what happened. In general, we baptize people into Christ, and then following that moment, we generally vote people into membership in our church. Sometimes you only do one or the other. If someone's already been baptized in another church, then it's simply a matter of just voting them into the church and saying, yeah, we'd love for you to be a part of our denomination.
So you guys do a congregational vote on every new member that comes into the church. I'm conflicted by this because on the one hand, I'm like, well, it seems like it's going pretty well for the Adventists. But on the other hand, I'm like, that seems like it would be a recipe for enormous discomfort.
No, it's not too, well, maybe it might be uncomfortable for the introverts in our church, but yeah, it is something that happens for every individual member. And so when someone wants to join the church, we're usually really excited about it. We end up saying, hey, Susie or Joe would like to join our church congregation. And does anyone have a motion? And like in very formal, like someone will raise a hand or say motion, any seconds, thirds, fourths, whatever. Any opposed, same sign. And generally everyone just says very silent. Cool, motion's carried, welcome to the family, and everyone just is really happy. We have a haystack, and we have a party, and it's just generally a good time.
Oh yeah, the haystacks. Those are the meatless taco Adventist treat that you were telling me about. Am I saying that
That's
right?
the one, yeah.
Okay. So I'm curious though on the membership thing. What's the criteria that the congregation uses to vote? I mean, is there like a resume that the potential new member has to work up, or is it just kind of on reputation?
It's not usually like a resume or anything super formal in that respect, but usually if you're joining the church, it's because you know someone there, or you've been hanging out for a while. And so I think it's generally the opposite because we are a little bit more of a peculiar denomination of Christianity. Generally, we're more like, well, we want to make sure you know what you're getting into and who we are. And so here's who we are. And as long as you're cool with that, then we'd love to have you.
Yeah, that's smart. I don't know if you saw the video that I did at the Missionary Baptist Church, but they've got this church covenant that they put up on the wall. And whether you agree with every component of the church covenant or not as an outsider is irrelevant. What I really like about it is the transparency for people who are coming in to be like, okay, what's a Missionary Baptist Church? What do you think about stuff? Aha, that is exactly what I'm signing up for. Or if I don't want to sign up for that, then I would go and look at some other churches. So I really like that thinking you're talking about in terms of the give and take of both parties knowing who they're signing up to do church with.
Yep.
Cool. Hey, that was really helpful. Thanks for picking up my bonus questions here at the end, buddy.
Absolutely. Always happy to chat.
Acknowledging that those of you who are watching this are coming from very diverse backgrounds, I still have to imagine the pretty good percentage of you watched that video and thought, oh, that really does kind of look like what we do. That's my impression of church. The building looked kind of the same. The leadership presented themselves in kind of the same style and fashion and tone. The theology sounded relatively familiar, maybe a few points of difference here and there. And so I don't think there's a ton for us to break down together coming out of this tour about just what the Sunday morning, I did it again, what the Saturday morning experience for them looks like. For me, the bigger questions have to do with the history and the more nuanced theology of Adventism. I don't know everything or even a lot about Adventism, but what I know is that they are part of a block of church that emerged in the 19th century. And there was this impulse that back at this point, and some people call this the Restorationist movement, to say, Protestantism and Catholicism right now, it's kind of weird and broken. We're just going to do an end run all the way over the top of all of those historical fights between Protestants, Catholics, and Orthodox and everybody else. And we're going to go back to like generation one of Christianity and try to take our cues from them, which creates a lot of interesting dynamics because, well, the Catholic Church can point to apostolic succession as its source of authority. The Protestants, the Calvinists, the Lutherans, they can point to reason and dedicated study of Scripture and what they would say is superior argumentation as their source of authority. But these restorationist groups, they weren't really in a position to point to either of those at the same level as a source of authority. So there's more of this sense of new apostolic authority that includes prophecy and views of the end times and some things that frankly make me feel a little bit uncomfortable and on edge. And it's a strangely mixed bag and very difficult to sort out historically when you get into all of these 19th century churches that are born mostly in the United States, because some of them like really punt on the core tenets of Christianity, like punt on the Trinity. Some of these groups create different para-scriptural documents, even additional scriptures that, well, that's pretty problematic for everybody else in Christianity outside looking into those groups. Others go into a very weird conservative place. Others go into kind of a utopian social gospel place. It's a very diverse thing. And so if you know that Seventh Day Adventism happened somewhere around that moment in history, but you don't look closely, it'd be easy to lump them in with any number of other groups. And the only way to cut through that is to get past the tour time, to sit down with these three guys and to really pick their brains about the very particular aspects of their theology and the evolution of their history. And my understanding is that the Adventists are in part unique because of, the Saturday thing and stuff like that, but also because they've been a very dynamic group. What they were at the beginning doesn't seem to me to be exactly where they're at now. And I'm really excited to unwrap that present with these guys and understand not just the theology now, but the story of Adventism better. So that's what's up next. I know that all I did right there was just throw out questions, but that's where I'm at with it. and I'm excited to learn more about it. These guys are awesome. You're awesome for being into it. Thanks for hanging out with me. Make sure to catch the next video when we sit down and do the interview and learn more about theology and history of Adventism. I'm Matt. This is a 10-Minute Bible Hour. Let's do it again soon.